DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And this evening we have some appetizers for you. And I know I said I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to do one for it, but I'm going to do a podcast for this fight that's coming up. UFC Fight Night, Adesanya versus Imavov, and that's in a Saudi Arabia event. And I think with the 200 plus podcasts that I've had, I don't know if I've ever done a fight night. And I said I wasn't going to, but man, it's really hard when you have such a great lineup, and with the first 3 or 4 events, even including UFC 311, you could argue that this is the best event so far. Like, this is pay-per-view quality. The only thing that's kind of holding it back from being pay-per-view quality is the fact that there's no title defenses. But besides that, man, this is about as good as it gets with names and notoriety and just good matchups. And then we got some heavyweights. We got three heavyweight fights on this card, so I'm loving that. But this is we mentioned it's in Saudi Arabia, so this is UFC Adesanya, UFC Fight Night Adesanya versus Imavov, and this is February 1st, 2025. So this is Saturday coming up. So tomorrow, but it's at 8 in the morning. So it's like it's from like 8 a.m. to like 2 p.m. So you have like right when you wake up, you'll have fights like pretty much all day. And if you're a WWE fan, around 5:30-ish, the Royal Rumble starts. So you'll have some combat, entertainment, whatever you want to call it, to watch all day Saturday. And I love that. I love that. You can just roll out of bed and start binge watching UFC and good fights as well. So that's in Saudi Arabia. It's at the A&B Arena in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And man, this is a great card. I'll just want to get into it already, but just mention the heavyweight bouts on this card, which what makes this card even more intriguing to me, as there's 2 heavyweight fights on the preliminary card, and then there's one on the main card. And I'll just rattle those off real quick, because I don't think I'm going to get too deep into those fights and making any type of prediction, but I'll definitely be watching them. I want to see some heads get knocked off, heads roll, that heavyweight leather getting slung. And we've got some guys here that are pushing that 265 weight class. But on the preliminary card, we have Hamdi Abdullah Wahab versus James Pogus, and then the preliminary co-main event is another heavyweight bout between Shamil Gaziev versus Thomas Peterson. So you got the two heavyweight fights on the preliminary card, which makes it much more interesting than it would be. And then you have a heavyweight bout between 2 notable like heavyweight title contenders. These are guys that have fought for the belt or are just a couple fights or impressive wins from fighting for the belt. If John Jones will actually be willing to fight them. But you have on the main card, the third fight on the main card, you have a heavyweight bout between Sergey Pavlovich and Jarino Rosenstruck. Just for a heavyweight fan of heavyweights, just from that sense, you can't get much better than that. Just even the preliminary card and on the main card. But anyways, let's get into this card. Let's get into the main card of this and maybe get some of our predictions down. So can I get a menu? And so the first fight on the main card, you have a lightweight bout between Fares Zaim versus Mike Davis. And Fares Zaim I think most notably is known as a kickboxer, but he's I think he has a well-rounded ways to victory that shows that he's a true mixed martial artist because he gets the knockout, he can get the submission, and he can go the distance as well. But in his last five fights, he is 5-1, and he's on a three-fight winning streak. Most of those by decision, but he did get a KO, an impressive KO knockout, knee over Matt Frivola, and that was back September 28, 2024, just within the waning minute of the third round. So that was an impressive knockout. And then, like I said, mentioned he was on a four-fight winning. He's on a four-fight winning streak, but that fifth fight back against Terrence McKinney, he did get submission, rear naked choke in the first round, like 2-11 of the first round. But in his 20 matches, he has 16 wins and just four losses. In the 16 wins, we mentioned how he's got a well-rounded way of ability of being able to finish guys. Because in the 16 wins, he has 6 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission, and six wins by decision. And in the 4 losses, he's never been knocked out before. But the one that just highlights and just kind of has a kind of an alarm going off by it is that he has been submitted 3 times. 3 of the 4 times that he's lost, he has been submitted. And that fifth fight back, he got rear naked choked, and then he's just lost. And his other loss was just by decision. So maybe you guys kind of know where I'm going with this, even though Mike Davis is kind of a similar fighter, just in regards to he's just mainly a striker. He's a boxer, but he's has a very similar record, recent record, just a recent history record. He is 5-1 in his or 4-1 in his last 5 fights, and just like uh, Zaim, he's on a 4-fight winning streak, and then his 5th fight back he lost, and shouldn't be embarrassed or anything to say that he lost his 5th fight back to Gilbert Burns by submission rear naked choke. So very similar fighter history between these two guys, Mike Davis and Zaim. And then in his most recent fight, he did get a submission arm triangle choke over Nate Levy. That was March 16th, 2024. And so he had a submission win victory recently. His most recent win was actually we're talking about him being a striker and all that, but his most recent win was a submission choke. And in the 13 matches, he has 11 wins and just 2 losses. In the 11 wins, he has 7 wins by knockout and 2 wins by submission and 2 wins by decision. So, I mean, being that Fares, Zaim, and Mike Davis are both typically strikers, I think Mike Davis is more of a knockout artist because he's only had 2 wins by submission and 2 by decision. And then in his 2 losses, shows that he's an exceptional striker. He's never been knocked out, but he has been submitted once, the rear naked choke that we were talking about by Gilbert Burns, which is about as impressive. If you're going to lose to someone, that's an impressive person to lose to. That submission, and then just the one by decision. So just the 2 losses. So this is a very intriguing matchup and very equal matchup just in regards to both of these guys. Are Farid Zaim, he's a kickboxer. Mike Davis, he's a boxer. Typically their style. But a lot of times when you get those kind of matchups, one cancels out the other, and then before you know it, if one's seems to be losing the edge, or maybe the one's getting the edge, the one that's losing the edge will maybe start to try to go for some takedowns or clinches, because they don't like the way the striking game is going for them. But in this lightweight bout between Fares Zaim versus Mike Davis, I'm actually going with Mike Davis to win this, and I don't think it's going to be by knockout or just a point striking on the way to decision. I think Mike Davis is going to get a submission on Perez Zaim because he's shown that he is a little bit vulnerable with those with those submissions. Out of his 4 losses, 3 of them have been by submission. And I'm trying to see what type of submissions. Oh, they've all been okay. They've all been by rear naked choke. So that makes this a simple pick for me. So in the first bout on the main card between lightweight, the first fight on the main card is a lightweight bout between Perez Zaim versus Mike Davis. I'm going with Mike Davis to win this. I have him winning this by rear naked choke. All right. So now then, on to bantamweight bout between Saad Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira. So Saad Nurmagomedov, he is, let's see, he's more of an actual, a real mixed martial art, a true mixed martial artist, a well-rounded fighter. So he's not, he when he first started fighting, it was in mixed martial arts, so he's not coming in here with one skill or style outweighing the other. But I would say he's probably better on the ground and better at just kind of grinding out wins. That's definitely something that he's good at. I think just anyone with the Nurmagomedov or similar type name coming from where he's like Dagestan, it's all kind of similar. Khabib Nurmagomedov, but he in his last 5 fights, he is 4-1 as well in his last 5 fights. And his last win, he's only on a one fight winning streak. Moon Gafarov was his most recent fight, and he won that by guillotine choke. But then the second fight back, he did lose to Jonathan Martinez by way of decision. And in his 21 matches, he has 18 wins and 3 losses. In the 18 wins, he has 4 wins by knockout, 6 wins by decision, and 8 wins by decision. So he shows that he can beat you in any variable way. But for me, it looks as if he's probably looking to take you down, hold you down, and ground and pound. And if you end up giving up your neck or giving up your arm, he's going to jump on a submission. And then in the 3 losses, he's never been knocked out and he's never been submitted, but he has gone to decision 3 times. So it's not unbeatable like Khabib or some of the other fighters with that family name. So that's Saad Nurmagomedov, and he is fighting Vinicius Oliveira, who is like, this is kind of your, I would say Saad Nurmagomedov has a little bit better striking game than to be able to just say, oh, this is striker versus grappler. But that's kind of what it looks like, honestly, when you look at the recent fighter history. And Vinicius Oliveira has an impressive record as well. It seems like all these fighters are like 4-1 in their last 5 fights, which is very impressive. And he is on a 4-fight winning streak, with 3 of those fights actually being in the UFC. The 4th fight back was actually in UAE Warrior 39, which he got a TKO punch over Hakura Yoshino, had TKO punches. And then and then the 3 fights in the UFC. So he's on a 3-fight winning streak in the UFC. He had 2 of those were by knockout. Victor Mangral was a KO punch, and then Bernardo Sopa had a crazy flying knee against him. So he's had, and then his most recent fight was an impressive win over an impressive opponent, and Ricky Simone is starting to get a little bit of name recognition with some of the fights that he's had. So he's 4-1. He was knocked out by Ali Talib in that fifth fight back. But just going off of his uh, fight resume, he has let's see, so that's 23 total matches with 21 wins, with 16 of them being by knockout TKO, and then just two by decision or two by submission and three by decision. And then in his three losses, all his three losses have all become by knockout, but he's never lost by submission, never lost by decision. So that shows you he's got a good enough ground game that he's not getting submitted or anything, even with his wild striking and flying knees. But I think in this bout, I think in the bantamweight bout between Saad Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira, I think his striker versus grappler, I think that kind of gets canceled out a little bit. But I think Saad Nurmagomedov is going to be able to control this fight, whether it's on the ground or trying to keep it in close a little bit more, so Vinicius Oliveira can't lend any of those wild strikes, flying knees, or anything like that. And I think Saad Nurmagomedov, I don't think he's not gonna knock Vinicius Oliveira out, which that's been the only way he's ever lost. But I also don't think Saad Nurmagomedov is going to catch Vinicius Oliveira in any type of submission. So I think he's going to end up just grinding out a victory with ground and pound and holding him down and just win by decision over Vinicius Oliveira. But Vinicius Oliveira, if he's going to win this fight, it's going to be by some crazy knockout, some spinning back fist or a knee or something. But in this bantamweight bout between Saad Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira, I'm going with Saad Nurmagomedov to win this. I think he's going to win this by unanimous decision. All right. Now then, onto the more notable names. You know, the three more like the three fight main card here. We have a heavyweight bout between Sergey Pavlovich versus Zarino Rosenstrike. And Sergey Pavlovich is definitely a well-known fighter in the heavyweight division because he was right there fighting for the interim belt against Tom Aspinall and lost a close one against Alexander Volkov in his last two fights. But he's known for his for his for his Greco-Roman wrestling and combat sambo and just dominant ground and pound, just devastating ground and pound. If he lands a strike standing up and gets you on the ropes and on your back feet and ends up getting you down in a submission to land some devastating ground and pound, and it's going to be night for most people. But he is 3-2 in his last five fights, and he's on a two-fight losing streak. We mentioned he lost that 1 minute 9 second TKO KO punches from Tom Aspinall to keep him or hold him back a little while longer from having UFC heavyweight gold. And then he lost a close fight and a good fight to Alexander Volkov in decision. But the three fights prior to that, he was on a let's see, he was on a let's see, he was on a 6 fight knockout streak where he knocked out 6 guys in a row. Curtis Blades TKO, Tayatu Vasa KO, Derek Lewis TKO, Jamil Durak Imavov TKO, Maurice Green TKO, and Marcello Golo KO. So he was on before he hit this little bump in the road, he was on a hot streak of getting some crazy knockouts, and he just looked unbeatable there for a while. Couldn't all those fights happened in the first round. Guys couldn't even get him out of the first round. He was taking people out so quick. But in his 21 matches, he has 18 wins and just 3 losses. In the 18 wins, he has 15, a devastating 15 of them by knockout, and then just 3 by decision. And even though he's got the Roman wrestling and combat sambo background, he's never been much of a submission artist, but he has defense at least, because in his 3 losses he's only been knocked out twice and then just 1 loss by decision. So he's not really going for the submissions. Uh, more looking to finish people with ground and pound, but he has the ability to defend himself against any type of submission anyone's trying to put on him. And then Jarino Rosenstruck is who he's fighting, and he's known more for being a knockout artist as well, but not really Greco-Roman wrestling or combat sambo, more just like a kickboxing by Big E Boy over here. And he has kind of a similar record to Sergey Pavlovich. He is 3-2 in his last 5 fights, but he on the flip side of Sergey Pavlovich, he's actually instead of being on a 2-fight losing streak, he's on a 2-fight winning streak, where he beat Shamil Gaziev by TKO retirement, who he fights later. I guess he took him out in retirement. They threw in the towel after the fourth round, so he got the TKO over him, who he fights. So we'll get to get a glimpse of someone that Rosinho Rosenstruck beat recently, back on March 2nd, 2024. And then he had I'm surprised it was a split decision, honestly. I thought it was, from what I remember, I thought it was a more dominant win. I don't recall Tai Tuivasa looking that impressive for a while, but he beat, in his most recent fight at UFC 305, he beat Tai Tuivasa by split decision, just a 3-round one. But I'm surprised that went split decision, just because I thought Tai Tuivasa looked kind of terrible in his last couple fights. And then he's been beaten by Jalton Almeida, submission, rear naked choke, and then Alexander Volkov TKO punches. But he's had 20 total matches with 15 wins and 5 losses. In the 15 wins, he's had 13 wins by knockout, none by submission. So it shows that he doesn't really use the ground game or really go to it. But he still has a decent defense, being that Jalton Almeida has been the only person to ever submit him with the rear naked choke. And then he's won 2 by decision. And then in his 5 losses, he's been knocked out twice, submitted once. So he shows he's got a decent defense against submissions, and has a ground game, more used to try to be able to get back up, try to get back up after being taken down and stuffed takedowns. And then he's lost 2 by decision. And I look at this fight, this is a very, very competitive, even fight here. I see. Yeah. So Jarino Rosenstruck's ranked number 9 at heavyweight, and Sergey Pavlovich is number 4. But still, regardless of that, this is still a very competitive and even matchup. But I think Sergey Pavlovich is going to get back on track with his TKOs and knockouts. So in this heavyweight bout between Sergey Pavlovich versus Jarino Rosenstruck, I think Sergey Pavlovich is going to win this. I think he's going to win by knockout, and I think it's probably going to be led. It's going to start off from ground and pound, and he's going to end up finishing Jarino Rosenstruck on the ground with ground and pound. I don't think it's going to be like a clean shot in the first initial striking matchups they have, or coming together in their striking. I don't think it's going to be just like a one-punch knockout standing up. I think it's going to be something that's going to be set off by something like that, but going to be ended up finishing him with ground and pound on the ground. All right. Now then, on to the co-main event. We have a middleweight bout between Shahar Magomedov versus Michael Page, MVP. So Shahar, the Bullet Magomedov, gotta respect my red beard brethren in Shahar Magomedov here, and he's on the come up. At least that's what it kind of looks like. He's on the come up. He's 15-0, so obviously he's on a 15 fight streak. Uh, Four of those fights are in the UFC, so he's on a four fight, four UFC fight winning streak. And in those, three of those five fights, of just his five fight winning streak that he's on, have been by TKO and KO. And his most recent fight against Armin Patrinian, he got the Armin Petrosyan. He got the KO back fist, like the double back fist on him that won him the performance of the night. And that was just a crazy knockout. And I'll admit, I thought he was getting kind of beat up a little bit in that fight. It would have been real interesting to see if that fight would have went all three rounds or would have went to the third round, because he was taking some damage from Armin Petrosyan in that fight. But he had got that crazy double back fist knockout at the 4:52 mark of the second round, and that was back at UFC 308. October 26, 2024. But he's definitely a knockout artist. Muay Thai, a little bit different than the kickboxing, but in his 15 matches, he has 15 wins, 0 losses, and in the 15 wins, he has 12 wins by knockout and 3 wins by decision. So it's pretty clear what he's trying to do. He's trying to beat you up and get the standing striking knockout. KO or TKO, and it could come off of anything, flying knees, spinning back fist, hook kicks, just anything you can think of, finishing people with leg kicks and body kicks. Just very, very impressive. And like I said, gotta respect and gotta call out your red beard brethren. Gotta back your red beard brethren. Fighting Michael Page, this is a middleweight bout. And I guess his first couple fights in the UFC were all welterweight bouts, I do believe. So he's actually coming up in weight for this fight, and he is 3-2 in his last 5 fights in the UFC. His most recent fight was a loss to Ian Machado Gary, where he just never really could get anything going against Ian Machado Gary. Ian Machado Gary was always pushed up, clinching him or trying to take him down, and just never gave Michael Page the distance he needed to get anything going in that fight. But in his only other fight in the UFC was a decision win over Kevin Holland at UFC 299, and then he had some fights in Bellator with he lost a split decision in Bellator. His other loss in his second loss in his last five fights. But he has 26 matches with 23 wins and 3 losses. In the 23 wins, he has 14 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 6 by decision, and then in the 3 losses, he's only been knocked out once, never been submitted. So even though he's a great striker and kickboxer, he has a good enough defense on the ground and being able to defend takedowns and get off the clinch and get off the cage and get back up. And then has just the other 2 would be just the two losses by decision. So Michael Venom Page coming up in weight class, that's maybe a little concerning to me, just because he hasn't looked overly explosive or as if he's got like great knockout power in his last just I guess just his two showings in the UFC. His first 2 fights in the UFC at welterweight hasn't looked like overly explosive or as if he's got any type of like knockout power. So that's what concerns me a little bit about this, and and the fact that he's older. He's 37 years old, and just hadn't seen that knockout and that striking one punch knockout point striking ability that we've known Michael Page for. Like honestly, this fight would have been uh, more intriguing and maybe more exciting and more build up maybe to it if it happened like maybe like five years ago maybe. But in this middleweight bout between Shahar Magmadov, a Bullet versus Michael Venom Page, MVP. I'm going with Shahar Magmadov, Redbeard Brethren. You got to back him, and I'm going with him to win this, and I'm going with him to win this by knockout. I think he's going to knock Michael Page out for what, just the second time in his career, and I'm basing that off of age. Yeah, I'm basing that off of age. Douglas Lima was the only other person to knock him out in Bellator. But I'm going with that. I'm going with that off of age for Michael Page. So your chin kind of starts to go a little bit as you get older in age. But he's also coming up in weight class as well. So he's fighting a bigger, stronger fighter in Shahar Magmadov, and they're both strikers. Shahar said he won't go for a takedown, but I guess we'll have to see if Michael Page ever gets him on the ropes or gets him on his back feet on the run a little bit, and if he goes for one or if he just strikes it out until he falls down, Shahar Magmadov. But in this middleweight bout, the co-main event between Shahar Magmadov versus uh, Michael Page, MVP, I'm going with Shahar Magmadov. I have him winning this by knockout. And I think that's just a combination of things: age, coming up in weight class, and then just Michael Page just hadn't looked overly impressive in the first two fights, going one loss decision, one win by decision. But I haven't seen the knockout point striking type of mixed martial arts and karate type of style that you see from Michael Page. I hadn't seen that. Hadn't been very close. I know it's just been two fights, but hadn't been very close to really knocking anyone out in any of those fights. But have to admit that Kevin Holland and Ian Machado Gary are two tough opponents as well. So don't put nothing against them. All right, now then, on to the main event, middleweight bout. It's not a title fight. I mean, just off of how crazy and good this card and the names for the one of the few times in his career, it's not a title fight. It's not for the middleweight championship belt. We have a main event bout, a middleweight bout between Israel Adesanya versus Nasruddin Imavov, and Israel Adesanya, he's had kind of a bumpy road at the top here recently, but I mean, when you're at the top, it's kind of like you're either gonna lose and it hurts your status, or you're gonna win and I guess you're gonna continue those title defenses. But that's pretty much all of his fights here in his last pretty much since 29 April 13th, 2019 to August 18th, 2024. Pretty much every single fight he's been in has been a title fight. Trying to see, yeah, even the light heavyweight bout against Jan Blachowicz was a title fight. So just every single fight he's had since 2019 has been a for the title or defending the title or for the title. But we talked about a bit of his bumpy road. He's just 2-3 in his last five fights, and he's on a two-fight losing streak. Most recently, a face crank submission at UFC 305 to Dracus du Plessis, and man, just kind of a unexplainable, really confusing, head scratching loss to Sean Strickland, where he lost his middleweight bout to him, and then probably the fight he could retire on was his second round, the 421 mark knockout KO punches at UFC 287 over Alex Pereira. Like he during his pressers and stuff. Uh, media people asking him questions. From what it sounds like, it feels like he could retire retire right now. He's just doing it now because he still feels that he's good at it, and like he's not chasing any belts or chasing another fight against Alex Pereira. They asked him if he was thinking about moving up to light heavyweight. Like, no, I don't think so. I don't think he wants to end up going four and one against Alex Pereira. I think he'll take that final knockout win as his own. But in his 28 matches, he has 24 wins with 4 losses. In the 24 wins, he has 16 wins by knockout, no wins by submission, but he does have a submission game. He's Dracus du Plessis was the first person to ever submit him in his last fight that he had, where he wasn't able to regain the middleweight title. And then, so never been submitted, but has eight losses, 8 wins by decision. So he's either going to look for the knockout, or he's going to try to point strike you and grind it out and try to keep his distance and just win kind of a boxing or kickboxing match. And then in his 4 losses, he has 1 loss by knockout, 1 by submission, which we mentioned in Dracus du Plessis, and we mentioned easy to mention the 1 knockout as well, coming by Alex Pereira with TKO punches in their first meeting in the UFC for his middleweight belt. And then he has just two losses by decision. But I would say typically Israel Adesanya, he's a boxer looking for the knockout stoppage, and he's fighting. I would say probably this is a bit of a step back in competition for him, after just everyone he's fighting is either a number one challenger contender for the belt, or they're the belt holder. But he's taken a bit of a step back against, I guess you could say, an up and coming Russian fighter in Nazaruddin Imavov, and he's got kind of his recent record is kind of interesting. So he's 3-0. He's on a 3-fight winning streak against some impressive names. Brendan Allen, unanimous decision. Jared Cannon, TKO punches, which Israel Adesanya fought him, but went just a 5-round decision with him. So him knocking Jared Cannonier out in the 4th round, the minute 34 mark of the 4th round, is pretty impressive. And then Roman Dolidze, majority decision, a 5-round fight against him. And then the two, he's 3-1-1, with one of those ones being a no contest head clash against Curtis. Chris Curtis led to a no contest, and then his 5th fight back, he lost a light. It must have been a light heavyweight bout against Sean Strickland, but both of them are, I guess Sean Strickland and him are more well known for what they've done at middleweight. But yeah, so he's lost a similar opponent, just won a similar opponent. Lost to a similar opponent in Sean Strickland, but he's also beaten similar opponents like Jared Cannonier, and did it in more of an impressive fashion as well. But in his 20 matches, he has 15 wins and 4 losses, and then the 1 no contest. In the 15 wins, he has 6 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission, and 5 wins by decision. And then in the 4 losses, he has never been knocked out, only been submitted once. So he's got a good chin, has a good enough ground game and submission defense. And then he has 3 losses by decision, and then the 1 no contest, the head clash with Chris Curtis that we mentioned. So this is a tough one for me, honestly. I mean, Nazarene Imavov. This may be the toughest pick on the main card for me to pick. He's on an impressive 3-fight winning streak against those notable names, and Israel has on a bit of a a little bit of a bumpy road, kind of. Just because every fight he's had, that's got to wear on you after a while. Every fight that you're in, uh, being against a champion for the belt or defending your belt. So I'd say taking a bit of a step back in competition in Nazarene Imavov, even though nothing against him at all. But also kind of look at him, kind of Israel Adesanya, kind of look at him kind of similar to MVP to some extent because he's 35 years old and Nazarene Imavov is what, just like 29 years old. So kind of look at that a little bit. But in this middleweight bout, the main event middleweight bout between Israel Adesanya versus Nazarene Imavov, I'm going with Israel Adesanya to win this, but I don't think he's going to get the stoppage. I don't think he's going to stop Nazarene Imavov. I think he's gonna take him to school a little bit and just beat him up with point striking and win a decision over Nazarene Imavov. But get back on the winning track and the winning ways and see where a win like this, it could be a 5 round impressive performance. See what that, even if it goes to decision, still could be a very impressive performance going 5 rounds. So we'll be interested to see kind of where that places Israel Adesanya after this fight. Trying to see what his pound for pound or what he's still number two. I mean, hell, if he goes in there and knocks him out or just absolutely dominates him, you just almost can't deny Israel Adesanya for a rematch against Dracus du Plessis. So that's my picks here. Let's run through them one more time real quick and see if we can see. Well, for myself, we have to see if I can remember them myself. But so on the main card, the lightweight bout between Faris Zaim versus Mike Davis. I'm going with Mike Davis to win this. I think he's going to win this by submission because it's shown Faris Zaim shown that he has a bit of a tendency and a bit of that's a bit of a hole in his game, being submitted 3 times. Only three of his 4 times that he's lost have been 3 submissions and 3 submissions by rear naked choke. So I think Mike Davis is going to get Fares Zaim in a rear naked choke and win by submission. And then bantamweight bout, second bout on the card, a bantamweight bout between Saad Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira. This could be looked at kind of as your classic, kind of your grappler versus striker with Saad Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira being the striker and Saad Nurmagomedov being the grappler. But I think Saad Nurmagomedov is gonna win this, and I think, but I don't see the losses that Vinicius Oliveira. His only 3 losses have all been by knockout, but I don't see Saad Nurmagomedov knocking Vinicius Oliveira out. So I see him more pushing him up against the cage, trying to hold him down, a little bit of ground and pound, but I don't think he's got good enough ground and pound to knock Vinicius Oliveira out. But Vinicius Oliveira has also never been submitted, so I don't think he's going to get submission either. But in the bantamweight bout between Saad Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira, I'm going with Saad Nurmagomedov, but I think he's just going to win this by just controlling the fight, either pushing him up against the cage, laying prey, holding him down, getting a little pitter patter type of ground and pound, and he's going to win by decision. So in the bantamweight bout between Saad Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira, I got Saad Nurmagomedov winning. I got him winning by unanimous decision. And then on the third bout of the card, we have a heavyweight bout between Sergey Pavlovich versus Zarino Rosenstruck. And these are both, they're both heavyweights with a long list of knockouts on their resume. But I'm going with Sergey Pavlovich to win this, just because of the fact, like, yes, he's got the knockout ability and the striking and one punch kind of knockout capability that most heavyweights have. But the thing that he has that Zarino Rozenstruik doesn't really have is that he has a ground game. Like he's got the Greco-Roman wrestle, he's got the combat sambo. He has if you're not already sprawled out limp on the ground, he has and doesn't have to land any more ground and pound on you. He has some submission, from the combat sambo, submission sambo, Greco-Roman wrestling. But I think that pushes him over the top of Zarino Rozenstruik. But I'm mentioning all the submission and the ground game that kind of pushes him over Zarino Rozenstruik. But I think Sergey Pavlovich is going to end up getting the knockout. So in this heavyweight bout between Sergey Pavlovich versus Zarino Rozenstruik, I got Sergey Pavlovich winning this. I think he's going to win by knockout, and he's going to get back to his winning ways. He was on a crazy TKO, first round TKO winning streak. Had won six fights in a row by either TKO or knockout in the first round. So let's say that he's going to get back start a new streak there. So in the heavyweight bout between Sergey Pavlovich versus Zarino Rozenstruik, I got Sergey Pavlovich winning by knockout. All right, now then on to the co-main event, middleweight bout between Shahar Magmedov versus Michael Page. So we talked about, I didn't see it mentioned too much until I watched a couple of the pre-fight pressers, that Michael Page is coming up in weight class for this. He's coming up from 170 to 185, and sometimes that's a positive and sometimes that's a negative. Sometimes fighters are either drained from having to cut weight, or either they feel better from not having to cut weight, or it's flipped around. They're stronger because they're bigger at a cut more weight, or if they don't have to cut weight, they're smaller than the majority of just actual walk around weight. They're smaller than anyone they're fighting. So I'm looking at that for Michael Venom Page MVP, and I'm looking at his age of 37 years old, and that he just hasn't looked overly impressive in his first two fights in the UFC. Haven't seen a lot of one strike knockout ability or explosiveness. And Shahar Magmedov, on the other hand, has pretty much knocked out everyone he's on, and he's undefeated. Even though he was taking some damage against Armin Petrosyan, I would have liked to seen what would have happened if that fight would have went to the third round, but didn't have to worry about it. Didn't have to worry about it because he's landing these crazy double spinning back fists. So I'm in this bout. I've mentioned it, said it 2, 3, 4 times. I gotta go with my Redbeard brethren. And we mentioned Michael Page looking kind of old, looking not quite as explosive, as strong, not impressive not overly impressive in his first two fights in the UFC. Just one win, one loss, and he's having to come up in weight class against a guy that's on a heater. Definitely career-wise, Michael Venom Page is better, but he's 37 years old, and you got the young gun, the Redbeard brethren of just 30 years old. In the middleweight bout between Shahar Magmedov versus Michael Page, I'm going with Shahar Magmedov to win this. I think he's going to win this by knockout. He's going to get some crazy knockout, whether it's some crazy flying knee, or tries the double spinning back fist again. It's going to be something crazy, and it's going to hopefully it's after a couple back and forth from Michael Page, them coming together a couple of times with some of those explosive point strikes that you see out of Michael Page. Because Shahar Magmedov, he definitely will leave himself open to take some shots and damage. That's definitely won't be out of the question. But depending on, I guess, who dominates or looks good or looks better early on, depending on who will try to wrestle. Even though Shahar Magmedov said that he won't go, no matter what, he's not going for the takedown. But I guess we'll have to just wait and see, I guess. And then in the main event, the middleweight bout between Israel Adesanya versus Nasruddin Imavov. Um, this is maybe a little bit. This is a bigger step up in competition for Nasruddin Imavov, and maybe a little bit of a step back in competition from Israel Adesanya, who's just every single fight, every fight that he has is either for the belt or defending the belt. So I think that'll help Israel Adesanya get back on track on a new title run, trying to get a title, trying to capture the title again, and try to get that rematch against Dracus du Plessis or even Sean Strickland to put him in position for become middleweight champion for the third time. And I think for Nazarene Imavov, it's just a pretty big step up in competition. You know, you yourself, you're what, the fifth in middleweight, fighting uh, should be like one or two in Israel Sanye. So I guess we'll see. But he's fought three. His last three fights and wins were against notable names and were impressive as well. But I think Israel Sanye is going to be able to hold him off for at least for another fight card at least. So in the middleweight bout between Israel Sanye versus Nazarene Imavov, I got Israel Sanye winning this. I think Nazarene Imavov, he's tough, and Israel Sanye hasn't shown like the real KO knockout ability. Hasn't really been a while since he's knocked someone out. Besides Alex Pereira, he hadn't knocked anyone out since 2020, UFC 253, September 27th, 2020. Uh, TKO'd and punches and elbows, and then uh, and then teabagged Paul Acosta. So it hasn't shown really that's something overly common, that he's way of winning most of those fights. Besides the Alex Pereira one, are just fights that he wins by point striking and just being the better striker, keeping his distance and just winning by decision. So in the middleweight bout between Israel Sanye versus Nazarene Imavov, I got Israel Sanye winning. I got him winning by decision. All right, so that's my picks for at least the main card, and obviously it's mentioned that we're excited about just the preliminary card because we got some big boys on there. We got some heavyweight fights, two heavyweight fights there, and then even a heavyweight fight on the main card. So I'm excited for this. I just gotta try to plan on how I plan on watching this. If I want to wake up early and start watching the preliminary card from the start, or maybe wait till after 2 o'clock or something, and then try to rewatch it. Have to stay off the internet. Try to stay away um, from from spoilers. Yeah, try to stay away from spoilers and things like that. But have to balance that and the Royal Rumble. Don't need any spoilers. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So can I get a check, please?